welcome to the Society for Science of Reason. I'm Alexander Daly, joined by Lewis A. Beach. We are the founders of the Society for Science of Reason at scienceofreason.org. This is a video we're producing about the possibility of extraterrestrial life existing elsewhere in the universe and the possibility of that life having visited planet Earth. We take a skeptical approach towards the claim that intelligent life actually has visited Earth, but we're very excited to see the scientific investigation of the possibility of there being simple, much less intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. We plan in the course of this discussion, as we do in many others, to talk about the science and the pseudoscience behind extraterrestrial visitation and how we could possibly contact or find colonies of life outside that of our own solar system.
Exactly, because we are concerned essentially with two aspects of the discussion, because we feel there really are two aspects which we can look at. And as Alex mentioned, it's the actual scientific search for life and the more humanistic approach to seeing life. And essentially they can be characterized in two ways. The science side is doing what science always does, is looking for them. Whereas the non-science side, perhaps we should say, pertains to the notion that they've already visited us, they've contacted us in some way, whether it be via cattle mutilation, abduction, probing, flying over a small or secluded house, any number of these other claims. I think, should we start with the actual scientific search for extraterrestrial life? One of the main agencies for this is SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is essentially a radio transmitter. It's transmitting radio signals throughout our solar system, and hope eventually across the universe, and maybe one day across the galaxy. We don't know. This is probably the best way in which trying to locate or look for perhaps intelligent life, rather than primitive life or microscopic life that may exist on neighbouring planets or even neighbouring moons. There's good reason to suggest that searching a number of moons, particularly around Saturn and of course on Mars, recent discoveries of water may contain the right building blocks, if not the right habitat for primitive life to develop, and then we could eventually go forward. Of course, on Mars it would be pretty difficult for anything above a bacterial life form to exist or to thrive, as it would be on a number of the moons, because the heat is lacking, as is light, and they're not very hospitable conditions. But bacteria, as we know, is very, very hardy and could withstand a lot of these harsh conditions. However, I said if we're talking about intelligent life, we know that it would probably be very, very unlikely that there'd be any aliens close to us, let alone visiting us. We know it's practically impossible, as far as we know, that you can't actually go faster than the speed of light. And even if you were travelling at the speed of light, it would still take many, many years, at least Earth years, to actually reach us. So you have to propose either a concept of a alien spacecraft, perhaps, with a number of generations that keep passing on this hereditary ideology that we must keep our race going. A real last-ditch effort, but perhaps it could be an exploration mission, but you could do that much more effectively in the way perhaps we're doing it. Or it could be for resources, or their planets running low on natural resources, is practically critical to their life, or for any other reasons. And the only way they could really do that is by creating some form of vehicle that could sustain many, many generations of this life to continue their quest. I'm not sure are there any other ways through which they could perhaps reach us that's at least feasibly realistic.
Well, we mentioned the Earth-based program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence setting. The theory behind it is that the first attempt to communicate would not be through physical contact, because that's a rather extreme, uncertain way of making contact with a technologically advanced civilization. It instead seems more likely that the first contact would be made through radio waves, the broadcasting of patterns, numbers that virtually any intelligent species would be able to recognize. This is the primary goal of SETI, is to not only broadcast radio signals that possibly other forms of intelligent extraterrestrial intelligence that have discovered radio waves could receive and decode, but also to receive any radio waves that perhaps other civilizations with similar questions would have been led to broadcast our way as well. And so there are two primary goals of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence as a program. That's to not only make contact, but also to receive contact if there are civilizations that are taking the same approach towards contacting intelligent and technologically advanced civilizations. And it would appear as though we have yet to find any of these civilizations, but we also must remember that for all the vastness of the universe, we are dealing with interstellar distances. Radio waves, information, the cosmic speed limit still applies to them. They can only travel as fast as the speed of light. So if we're dealing with a civilization, say 5, 10, perhaps even thousands of light years away, by the time we receive that information, that civilization could possibly not even be broadcasting the signals anymore. We have to understand how to decode noise naturally emitted from celestial bodies in the universe versus patterns that we would expect to find broadcast by an extraterrestrial intelligent civilization. And that would appear to be the first attempt to contact life before you send a generational spaceship out, unless this really is a last-ditch effort. It would appear as though it would seem more reasonable that they would attempt to communicate with us through radio waves, at least let us know that they're out there. They can't really expect a conversation to take place because we are dealing with interstellar distances here. So certainly
it wouldn't be like a Skype call, would it?
No, it wouldn't. It certainly wouldn't, no. So any information that would be transmitted between the two civilizations could perhaps be transmitted over generations. So it doesn't seem to be the case that we would make contact, reliable contact with an extraterrestrial civilization in our lifetime, but perhaps we could be, as Michio Kaku has said, in the middle of an interstellar conversation and not even realize it because the radio waves do take such a long time to make contact with us. So the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is one aspect of the scientific search for life elsewhere in the universe. There are other scientific fields that are devoted in part exclusively to the search for life in general. One of those fields is astrobiology. And even though astrobiology itself isn't a scientific field, it's more of a label you give to an emerging body of research. There's the Astrobiology Institute of NASA. There are no real departments of astrobiology yet among the major universities. They're simply scientists who identify with that movement to search for cosmic signs of there being life elsewhere in the universe. So it combines fields like astrogeology, which study the geological makeup of the planet to determine whether or not the planet would even be suitable for rudimentary building blocks of life to form. Astrobiology can also look for biosignatures in the planet to look at the atmosphere to see the elemental composition of that atmosphere, whether or not it reflects a similar composition as the atmosphere on Earth, which could perhaps be used to make the conclusion that this planet not only could support life, but is actively engaged in harboring it. Those fields don't directly address the possibility of there being intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, but perhaps before we start devoting ourselves to making contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, we should first ensure that there is even the possibility of simple alien life existing elsewhere in the universe. And to me, the probability of that being true is incredibly likely given the vastness of the universe. There's the famous equation, which is the Drake equation, and essentially what it is you multiply all these different variables together. You start off, I believe, with the number of galaxies in the universe, and you want the number of stars, the average number of planets that orbit a star, the average number of planets in a star system that can harbor some simple form of intelligent life. And the interesting thing about the Drake equation is that as you move from left to right across the equation, the less you know about the variables you're trying to calculate. So it provides for us a decent estimate, depending on the figures you use, of the possibility of there being extraterrestrial life. You can modify the equation to account for intelligent civilizations capable of communication, or you can drop one of the variables and you deal simply with the possibility of there being self-replicating life to begin with on other planets. So you can modify the equation a bit. But we don't know enough yet about the universe to see, or to narrow, rather, the margin of error involved with those equations. But given the vastness of the universe, even if life is scarce and it's scattered about throughout the universe, there's still going to be probably quite a few planets that are capable of harboring at least simple life, it would appear.
And of course, with intelligent life, it would entirely depend on their evolutionary history. But you'd even have to suppose that this intelligent life want to be contacted. It's not too difficult to imagine that our radio signals could perhaps reach one of these planets that is capable of harboring life and has been doing so for so long that intelligent life has been able to arise. Intelligent life that can understand our signals because I believe they're sent as mathematical equations, because mathematics is the universal language through which that's the most probable way in which another alien life would be able to send communications to, and how we can communicate via mathematics. We would have to assume that they are even interested in hearing from us. And perhaps, I mean, I've always wondered whether that should be another part of the Drake equation, whether we must ponder the fact that they'd want to. Now, to me, I mean, it's a bit, we've gone to try and resist being too anthropomorphic about this other race, because as we know, evolution is such a contingent process that the slightest sort of malfunction, shall we say, if you want to employ a word like that, in the evolutionary strain can either completely halt the development of further life or delay it or whatever. But it would seem likely that for survival reasons, wanting to discover is, to me, it sounds like quite an important survival mechanism. So, again, that's not too difficult to imagine another race wanting communication. But again, as we said, there's no point, from our point of view, creating a spacecraft or whatever and journeying out, particularly not now. We can, we haven't been much further than the moon in a manned craft. So what's the chance of us, boarding on a spaceship and training the generations about the Earth who will never have seen our own planet or whatever, to go out and hope to try and find these races, no matter how fast they're going. And so it would seem more likely, why would these alien visitors build these crafts where you would need to have hereditary knowledge and these generations to continue to want to strive for the continuation of their race and to meet with other people or to inhabit another planet. It'd be more easy to scour their range to try and see if there is anyone out there, rather than piling all into a spacecraft and trying to find it. It's on that basis that really all these objects that we apparently see in the sky we don't need to really offer too much scientific scientific investigation to, because the Drake equation shows, or helps to show, just how unlikely it would be for an alien race, an intelligent race, to actually exist, let alone in our near solar system, or on a galaxy, or in our galaxy cluster. Is it really conceivable to create a machine that can come into our atmosphere and do whatever investigation it has to do, and then go back? We're talking about incredibly long distances, with using vehicles consisting of matter to try and travel these distances. And even if these spacecraft did exist and they finally got to us, at what point do they say, right, we need to make sure this air is right for us, or the water is good for us, or whatever? It just seems so unlikely that they would do this. Now, aliens is a very interesting sort of sector or genre of perhaps the more supernatural claims that we're scientists investigate, because as we've devoted the first part of this conversation to, there is a scientific study for it. There is a way we can begin to understand this through science, and because of that, we can begin to understand another race's motives and their desires and their ideologies, perhaps. Whereas if it was with ghosts or whatever that we have to look at, it's a little bit more difficult, because where do you start scientifically? Where do you start to investigate a supernatural paranormal entity?